Otro viernes más con el Star Citizen Live. Que en este caso, bueno, pues nos van a hablar de todo eso, de las construcciones, de cómo se sacan los parches a la luz y demás historias, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, pues 43 segunditos y ahí estamos. A ver, hoy si me da tiempo. Saludos malísimas, saludos Zorro, saludos Villanarco, saludos Chinarro, saludos Railker, saludos Yote, saludos Roibo, saludos Tierufo, saludos Clean Seven, saludos Sergio, saludos 50, saludos Hot, Zorro ya está, Clean Seven, Monkey, Names, Belcor, mucha gente por ahí. Ahí estamos. Y en 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Y buenas cordas que cantas. A ver. The show will begin shortly. Sun TM. ¿Nos están haciendo un Sun TM? Tun, 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 tun. Tiene que haber empezado ya, ¿eh? Y nos matan. Nos matan totalmente, zorro. Vamos a ver si sale ya, tío. Ahí, buenas cartaginas. Todavía sigue que no arranca, ¿eh? La luz se mueve. Si la luz se mueve, estamos salvados. Oh, Dios mío.
Hey, everybody. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We're experiencing minor technical difficulties getting everybody into the call.
Están
So,
están
last chance.
experimentando pequeñas
Use the
dificultades
bathroom.
técnicas
Get
que en
yourself
unos
a
minutos.
snack. Put a meme up on Reddit. Publish a previously thought private DM conversation. Whatever. And we'll start the show in just a few minutes.
Pues nada, habrá que esperarse. ¿Qué le vamos a hacer, chavales? Mima, querida.
Hello, everybody. At the top of weird little screen. I froze there. I'm like, what? Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live builds, publishes, and platforms. Or was it platforms and publishes? Who knows? I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and joining us on the show this week are a roundtable of incredibly technical director type folks who are involved in bringing all the aspects of Star Citizen that all of our wonderful developers create over the course of the days and the months and the weeks, and bring them together into builds and publishes and make them accessible to you, the player. So we are stepping back behind the scenes here, and we are joined by, well, a couple people. Let's just go around the room and see who we're talking to. Miles? I think you've been the longest since you've been on one of our shows, so we're going to start with you first. Who are you? What do you do for Star Citizen?
I'm the director of build operations. I manage the team which deals with the version control mostly and the build system, creating the builds that we deliver out to the players.
Okay. Ahmed, we'll go to you next. Who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
Bueno, Miles lo que hace es que se dedica a hacer... Es la persona encargada de dirigir al equipo que construye las builds que luego nos salen a nosotros los jugadores.
We receive the build once it comes out from the build system, and we try to deliver it to every single player, whether internally, externally, leveraging a lot of cloud technologies, automation, and some good old school also system management and system engineering about how to keep all these moving parts together to deliver like a good player experience, and at the same time to harvest as much debug information. And because we're in active development, so it's kind of very unique kind of role. We're not just serving a live product. We're also, yeah.
All right. And then there's Benoit. So on the show today, Benoit, who are you? What do you do?
You need to say my last name first.
Bueno, este de aquí abajo lo que se dedica es a entregar. O sea, una vez estos hacen la build, se la entregan a estos y estos lo que hacen es asegurarse de que nos la entregan a los jugadores tanto a nivel interno y a nivel externo, y también a recabar pues toda la información pues de bugs relacionada con eso y tal, porque debido a que son un desarrollo en activo y todo eso, ¿no? Que es lo que estaba comentando un poco.
Launcher and a couple of in-game services as well. So that means taking Miles's build that goes through Ahmed's systems and getting that into your hands.
Este de aquí, pues creo que era Mais, me parece. Se dedica pues a lo que es temas de servicios de web y el launcher, está comentando también de Star Citizen.
A lot too. I mean, that's the good thing. We deploy a lot.
Entre otros servicios más también, ¿no?
We get to decide whether they can make it or not. So not all the builds that we deploy you will get to see.
Right.
But sometimes there's so many, yeah.
Yeah, not every build even makes it to the point where it can deploy. Some of the builds are. So let's talk about that before we get into the question and answer period, which is what most of the show is.
Bueno, están diciendo que no todas las builds que construyen ven la luz, que eso ya lo tenemos visto en algunas veces en el SC Testing Chat, que nos comentan de que que están intentando hacer una build y dice, pues no ha sido posible hasta mañana tal, ¿no? A veces lo vemos así.
We're never talking about build systems and publishing and platform stuff, so we're in an area that a lot of folks may not be familiar with. So let's talk about how a build becomes a law. That was Schoolhouse Rock, never mind. Let's begin by doing an overview. How does the build and publish process work?
So, I mean, it obviously starts with the developer committing a change. Once that goes through that process, we have tools which allow the developers to kick builds from our release streams. Once the build is finished, we go through a manifest process and we create what we call the build manifest. And basically, it's just the list of files that dictates what the launcher should patch down, and we upload that and kind of hand off to Ahmed from there.
Yeah, that's where the custody kind of switches from a team to another. But also we do not really have silos. Like all these teams actually work together for so many years. So it can be that we can actually be following up on the build system and trying to anticipate what could be wrong. And we could be also looking at deployment and see what could have gone wrong. So from that moment that we have a build, we have a manifest, it depends on the size of the deployment. Every deployment is going to go to in a single region, a small number of audience, a QA or a staging deployment. This is fully automated. You go through a web interface, you click deploy, everything gets created from scratch, share nothing. Like VMs get created, a Kubernetes deployment for a new generation of services, namespace gets created, a Helm deployment chart gets initiated. That chart is a global chart, has other charts underneath it. A lot of moving pieces, so many moving pieces gets deployed so you can have that fleet of services and the simulators, the dedicated game servers deployed in the cloud, accessible whether it's an internal group of people or external. If it's external, we so far, due to how rapid things are changing, we'll have to have a captain to have someone who's really running the deployment. So every deployment in that case is a get branch. You go take our automation repo and you create a branch, and that branch will have some of the facts that are specific to this deployment. These facts are always changing. We're allowing very last minute change because we are a development company. We are really developing as we go. It's now we're trying to take away any ability to change things very fast. So that deployment gets created. It's a blue-green deployment, and all the resources get allocated around the world, and it's hidden. At this time, our internal QA start hitting it. And depending, every deployment has a goal too. Like every deployment has a very specific goal, whether we're delivering a feature, we're testing a feature, we're collecting feedback, and QA hits that part hard. And there is another checklist with other departments. Everyone has to know this is a new gamer experience where we are exporting or publishing a full gamer experience. It's not a bunch of virtual machines just being deployed in the cloud, and everyone has to get an agreement and all the work gets done. And then the players see the light comes on in the launcher. And I think that's where you get to see more. I mean, Platform is involved in all of that.
Bueno, básicamente está diciendo de que, hablando un montón, evidentemente, pero son cosas de cómo funciona. Está explicando súper rápido cómo funciona todo el tema de cómo sucede con un parche o qué sucede, ¿no? Antes de lanzarlo. Entonces, la build, lo que viene a ser es, ellos tienen como una especie de manifiesto de cosas, ¿vale? O sea, la build en sí tiene un manifiesto y entonces digamos que se revisa qué cosas de ese manifiesto cambian o qué cosas que llaman el manifiesto de la build, el manifiesto de la construcción. Y entonces una vez tienen eso, pues lo juntan todo. Dice que además se junta a través de es como ir a una web y hacer unos checks allí para juntar las cosas que son necesarias. Y además se trabaja también conjuntamente con el equipo de QA, el interno que tienen, porque bueno, cuando van a sacar una build, normalmente suele ser pues que sacan una característica concreta o para probar específicas, o sea, cosas específicas, y entonces se centran en conseguir feedback de esas partes, ¿no? Y bueno, que también a la hora de probar, o sea, a la hora de las builds, que digamos que no es algo cerrado, sino que tratan de que se pueda hacer cambios rápidos en la medida de lo posible para meter o sacar cosas. Y finalmente que a la hora de sacar las builds a lo que es al resto de la gente, que no hay un proceso, digamos, entiendo que automatizado, sino que dice que hay una persona detrás de eso que está pendiente de que las cosas se hagan como se debe hasta que pues los jugadores ven iluminado algo en el launcher, ¿no?
We're taking questions live from the chat. If you have a question that's related to the build, publish, or platform process, you can submit it in the chat. These are all things that exist external of the game. So as a general rule of thumb, if your question has anything to do with what's inside the game, this is not the show for that. So those questions won't be asked. Additionally, we also collected questions throughout the week, as we usually do from Spectrum. We pulled out the ones that were appropriate to our guests here, so let's start in with those while some of the live ones come in. Miles, how does the process of creating and maintaining a build from a dev branch work? For example, how is specific functionality selected from the dev branch, put into a build such as 3.10, whilst others are left behind in game dev? And then once it's created, how are these changes maintained between each build?
Sure. So we actually maintain dozens of dev streams where individual features live and are housed. And as those features get completed, they're merged up into the more collective streams that get tested by QA as well, so we can kind of see how they play together before creating the release branch eventually. Usually once everything's ready for like a 3.10 or 3.11, we'll branch that out and start cutting builds from there. We have pretty robust inclusions process that allows us to strip it down and make sure things aren't going out that shouldn't be yet. And then as far as I think I already touched on that, we kind of have a nice user interface that developers, anybody production can go and request a build. So production a lot of times is the ones responsible for kicking the release builds and maintaining that pipeline of who does what when the builds where. As far as how to get selected things, so obviously bug fixes go into our release streams. We have a bunch of internal automated tools that as soon as changes are submitted to those streams, we start bringing those changes back down to the lower level developers and distributing them out so that everybody has access to those changes as quick as possible.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that maybe isn't always apparent that everybody's working in these individual feature streams. So that the active feature team can work in their stream, and the ship team can work in their stream. The ship art team can work in their, the feature team is this one, art team is this one, and they're all working in these different streams, so they don't step on each other's, toes and overwrite each other's work while they're working. And then that process of integration is where bugs are born. Quite often.
It's huge. We actually manage quite a few microservices that...
Claro, están hablando de una cosa muy interesante, de cómo estáis hablando de que a la hora de trabajar, pues digamos que cada equipo, pues el equipo de personajes, el equipo de naves, tiene como su propia, vamos a decirlo, su propia línea de trabajo. Entonces, cuando se juntan esas líneas de trabajo y se hace la build es cuando realmente se producen los bugs. Entonces está hablando de que tienen como un sistema de tratar, de que además cuando se juntan las builds de esa manera, pues tratar de que a nivel interno todo el mundo tenga acceso a esos cambios lo más pronto posible. Que por cierto, antes había comentado que el primer paso para que se tenga que hacer una build, pues es que un desarrollador realice un cambio, ¿no? O sea, un desarrollador del juego realice un cambio, que puede ser pues lo que sea, un artista, algo que se haya cambiado, ¿no? En ese momento.
Right.
It does do a couple traffic jams on those integration days for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Benoit, what database technology are we using and why?
¿Qué tecnología de base de datos estamos utilizando y por qué?
NoSQL, what are we using?
Well, so the answer is complicated, but we do use a plethora of databases. Platform systems tend to rely on structured data, and so they're going to mostly leverage technologies like MySQL or MariaDB, which is the same kind of engine. But since a lot of the game systems are also made by microservices, then each service can actually use its own data store, and so we have the ability to use the right data store for the right use. So it's not like NoSQL for everything or right. SQL for everything, right? It's more like this use case needs a structured data set, and so we're going to use this engine, right? So in general, the technologies that are in use in the game today and in platform, both of them share a lot of these technologies, but MySQL is used to persist a lot of the data on both ends. There's MongoDB is also a big player in a lot of the dynamic variable systems that power the game. And Redis is a real workhorse for a lot of the really real-time stuff, like Spectrum red counts or distributed logs. We're going to use Redis for a lot of this, which is really our Swiss Army knife.
Me están preguntando que las bases de datos que utilizan en lo que es Star Citizen, dice que en realidad no se resume, que es una pregunta, no es simple de responder en el sentido de que usan varios tipos de bases de datos según necesidades, porque pues hay cosas que hay que hacer en tiempo real. Entonces, la plataforma que tienen les permite, o sea, digamos, el sistema que tienen, como que les permite escoger qué usar en cada momento. En este caso, usan MySQL, que es una forma de base de datos. También utilizan Redis para lo que es todo lo que es en tiempo real de Spectrum y demás. Y MongoDB también, que no tengo ni puta idea, pero bueno, esas son las que utilizan para diferentes cosas, ¿no? de lo que es el proyecto.
Technology that AWS introduced with their next generation or new generation. When it comes to the game servers run in C5. If we have some backers watching the live stream from the days before 3.0, We were doing some comparisons between the C4 and the C5. These were changes in the hypervisor, changes in the CPU powering the VM underneath. When it comes to the cloud, you're usually trying to hit a very specific sensitive part of your workload. So for the game servers, we have to meet in two main areas. We need to maintain a decent ratio between the memory and the compute, and we need to make sure that we have very fast compute. So C5s fit that very well. We have other services that are single-threaded, that they need a very, very fast single-core clock speed, so that you would run on Z1D, also another Nitro instance. We have other services that require moderate CPU clock speed, but they have larger memory usage. They will be running on R5. So it's all in our availability. Actually, a lot of our workload, we try not to be stuck to one single size, because we need to make sure if there is any issues and we cannot allocate VMs from that size, we always have a backup size. We have backup regions behind our regions, but sometimes you have to choose your battle, whether you're willing to go to a second region to allocate resources, or you're willing to go for the second most optimal machine size. I hope this is not so boring, but we use a lot of them, and we try to use the new ones.
The thing that's interesting. The thing that's interesting about that is that you realize that sometimes you try to get a VM from the cloud and you can't because they're out of VMs, and so that's
Yes.
And you end up playing the world's most advanced game of whack-a-mole.
I mean, it's what keeps the job like interesting and entertaining.
It just got the image. What is it? The of Ahmed was there with spinning plates.
Yeah.
On yeah. I guess a follow up here. Are our game servers dynamically deployed depending on the user requesting to play, and can game servers dynamically scale by load?
Yes, we are very proud of our auto-scaling system. We have a buffer-based auto-scaling system. Game servers are slot-based. So if the game instance will take a specific number of slots, you cannot overload that. So when you auto-scale a system like that, you are bound to use what we call a buffer system, where you always have a step ahead of you of VMs or instances, both in the logical and in the physical level, that are ready to serve the players. And that buffer size, how much you maintain ahead of you, has to do with how fast it takes an instance from scratch to load the map and be ready for players. So these are adjusted. This auto-scaling system works on a regional level. So
Bueno, están hablando de si tienen un sistema escalable de logueos. Por lo que entiendo es que están hablando de cosas que son un poco, o sea, son técnicas, no, lo siguiente, ¿vale? Son muy técnicas. Y le acaban de preguntar si tienen un sistema escalable de logueo. Y dice que sí, que tiene como una especie de buffer que permite, pues, un buffer que es o sea, escalable, que les permite, pues, adaptarse a la cantidad de jugadores que loguean para cargar la cantidad de cosas que sean necesarias.
What we got from the chat here? Miles, what's changed hardware-wise since the last time we talked about this? And what effect has it had on build times and publishes?
Sure. Well, I think it's been about 4 years since we last talked about this topic, so we've pretty much upgraded across the board, be that storage, RAMs, adding more CPUs. We've also spent a lot of time utilizing all the hardware a lot better with better build distribution across the machines. And a lot of that has helped greatly over the last 4 years. So we used to at least 6 hours per build. Back then, we could only have about 2 running at any given time. Nowadays, we're sitting at about 3 to 4. We can have up to 4 builds running simultaneously. And we probably put out 12.
Bueno, están hablando de que antes, bueno, le están haciendo preguntas sobre el hardware y sobre qué cosas han mejorado de hardware para poder trabajar y si les ayuda en su trabajo. Comentan que antes, hace como 4 años, tardaban como unas 6 horas en construir una build y podían tener como 2 builds al mismo tiempo. Ahora mismo tardan como 3 horas en poder construir una build. Y además pueden tener 4 a la vez, que son capaces de publicar como en torno a 12 builds por día.
It can be. Fortunately for me, the developers typically own a lot of the processes because nobody can solve their resolution conflicts better than they can. There is a somewhat heavy build process to that where we always try to test the changes upon merging and make sure that they're not going to break anything in the stream that they're going to. So that it's time consuming. I'd say it was a better answer.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that developers have the ability to kick off a build.
Mhm.
Is that a good thing?
I go back and forth on that every day. I think typically it's a good thing. The less barriers that we can put in front of developers and allow them to iterate more quickly without need from intervention from us it helps both them and us because it frees us up to continue to work on more tools that make their workflow more efficient and allows them to not be stuck waiting on us for things.
How do we test and benchmark our systems for stability?
Bueno, están comentando de que si los desarrolladores tienen la posibilidad de patear una build, ¿no? Entonces, dice que sí, que se trata de no ponerle ninguna barrera, que tengan el mayor contacto posible los desarrolladores, que no tengan muros a la hora de trabajar y que puedan hacer lo más rápido posible y que continúan construyendo herramientas para hacer eso posible, ¿no?
In Python, which is super nice, and it allows us to basically simulate, thousands and thousands of users, so we can write scenarios about what they do. For example, melt a ship. Like, what if X amount of players melt a ship, right? How does the system react? So we can test that, and we've used the same principle in the same framework to build a game facing locust system that we call Pestilence, which is basically yes, I know the naming is nice, but basically what Pestilence is able to do is mimic what you guys do in game. So he's able to log into the game, connect to the servers, and then do specific actions that we want to test. So if, let's say, we have a service that has an issue and we're trying to see what's causing issues, and we can actually write a scenario that does that, and then we can spawn thousands and thousands of locusts doing that in game to simulate what happens when we actually launch a build, because that's usually what happens, is like there's a big storm of people doing the same action. And so
bueno, dice que le están preguntando que si tiene algún tipo de benchmark o algo de eso para comparar la estabilidad del sistema, y dice que sí, que tienen como una especie de movida que permite comprobar pues la estabilidad metiendo como miles y miles de jugadores para probar. Y que además tienen otra cosa que le llaman, o sea, otra herramienta que le llaman pestilencia, que lo que hace es se mete, o sea, que simula el comportamiento o las acciones de los jugadores, pues haciendo las diferentes cosas en el servidor para comprobar si un servidor pues crashea, tratar de buscar el motivo mediante ese sistema, ¿no? Del sistema pestilencia.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But we do have headless clients as well. That's where I was going, right? Okay. Where there are automated systems that can do, which is called a cloud test launcher, which can actually do that running the game client as well. Yeah. But the testing there is more focused around testing the game server performance than the cloud, the MMO side of the game. Basically.
Yeah, that's Martin Sr. and his team working on that cloud test launcher. We'll actually be talking to his team about it in ISC next quarter, hopefully.
Cool. Awesome.
In case people wonder how far ahead we plan these things.
Sí, luego dice que también tienen una especie de test para poder testear el tema de la nube, pero también los servicios de la nube, pero que está más centrado, o sea, se centran más en probar lo que es el rendimiento del servidor en sí, ¿no? Que es más importante.
Yeah, 100%. We do not discriminate. They all have the same spec. What really happens is player behavior affects a lot what's happening in the game server, and also your latency. Like the game server, the dedicated game server is a very, very sensitive workload. It's very sensitive to any kind of overhead, sensitive to any kind of latency issues. So no, everything is at parity. We do not discriminate. Actually, the only workload that we have that always run in the same exact platform, no change, no matter what the environment is a dedicated game server. There are other services that we can give them less resources in smaller environments because we know they're not going to get hard. When it comes to that monolith simulator called dedicated game server, we always make sure that it has the same exact spec everywhere it goes.
Okay, I know the second half of the question was this person is from the Australian. I'm guessing this person's from the Australian region, and they were saying that it seems a little more sluggish. But as far as the actual hardware behind in the servers, they are at parity.
It is the same, yeah. And we actually care a lot for our customers in Sydney. Like one time we had issues in the Sydney VPC and we had to allocate some VMs in Mumbai, like in India, which is it's the far, but still was the closest area in AWS, and they got really upset. We're like, super fast, we're gonna fix this issue and go back to Sydney. So if they're having any issues, like I guarantee them, it's not related to the hardware.
How much storage space is needed for one game instance?
It's the same way that, like, when it comes to how much, so that the Windows build and the Linux build are different in size, right? But the different size is very, like, not that big of a deal. The data file, the B4K file that everyone has, I have to have it on my servers too, so we can stream all these static files in and out and make the game server run. So it's very close to how much you download to run your client.
Okay.
Bueno, estaban hablando sobre una cosa de derivación de servicios, que parece que tuvieron un problema en Australia y tuvieron que desviar los servicios de Australia durante un momento a Mumbai, pero no tengo muy claro cómo va el tema, pero que luego volvieron atrás rápidamente y lo solucionaron y tal. Pero bueno, otra de las preguntas es ¿cuánto ocupa una construcción en un server, ¿no? En un servidor? Y dice que más o menos ocupa lo mismo que el cliente que tenemos nosotros instalado.
How long does it take to compile on average?
3 to 4 hours, roughly.
Sí. O sea, ¿cuánto tarda en compilarse una construcción cuando está en PTU? Pues de 3 a 4 horas.
Well, there's always a lot of load on the system, so that could always cause times to fluctuate quite a bit. There's a lot of uploading that takes place during that, so sometimes the network can be bogged down.
Yeah, I was about to add that quick. It's not just compilation time. There's a lot of fan out and fan in. There's a lot of steps down. We go do a lot of things in battle, and then we collect them back in. And these are systems. Sometimes they are under development themselves. Sometimes we make changes that make things take longer or take shorter. But yeah, if we were talking in general, like Mike definitely said, between 3 to 4 hours is our average.
And you're right, Ahmed, in that when a build is finished cooking, it's not ready to be distributed. And
They get blow on it for a while.
Yeah.
It's too hot.
Exactly. You gotta let it sit a bit, right? But no, it's because it needs to be uploaded, right, so that it can be distributed, and that step is fairly long as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the total time is 3 or 4 hours.
Yep.
Yeah, the client compiles themselves, or
Claro, está diciendo que el cliente o sea, que la build se compara, o sea, se compila relativamente rápido, pero que todavía, que las 3 o 4 horas se justifican porque una vez se compila lo que es la construcción, hay que subirla, ¿no? Hay que subirla a la nube y que eso demora entre 3 o 4 horas. Y que no se puede ya subir así pim pam. Dice que cuando se termina de cocinar que todavía está muy caliente. Que hay que esperar a que, pues, no sé, a revisarla o algo. Me imagino que le harán algún tipo de test interno.
features, they will come to us and request a feature branch, and DevOps will go create that feature branch, set up their integration flows using the automated tools that we mentioned earlier. And they'll move into that, and once it's feature complete, we help them where needed to get back into our dev branches and kind of repeat the process with teams as we go.
Is it annoying trying to find a file that was supposed to integrate and didn't?
Occasionally.
Hey, Benoit, let's talk Issue Council. Here's a good one. Are systems like the Issue Council directly linked to the internal JIRAs or whatever, internal JIRAs and stuff?
Yeah. That's been the idea since the beginning, right? Is that the report that's filed and confirmed on the Issue Council gets, if you see the CIG eye on it, then it's been imported to JIRA, basically. And so at that point, it can be tracked internally. It can be assigned to, because developers need a JIRA ticket to work or check in, right? And so that's the way we legitimize the changes that they have to do. And so, Issue Council is connected the same way to feed the status back from Issue Council. We're aiming to do improvements to that flow to give more visibility, but we still have a long ways to go before we can hit that. The roadmap is the same thing. The current roadmap, so the cards that you see on the roadmap, also comes from JIRA. So this is a live representation of the production as it stands the moment it gets put up there. So yeah, it is connected, and that's the key. It's the data source and the data destination.
Gotcha. What level of automation?
Bueno, lo que está comentando aquí que Hay una cosilla que le llaman Gear, que es, bueno, ellos digamos que tienen, donde ponen su programación a la hora de trabajar, debe ser como una especie de administrador o una cosa así para ellos poder trabajar, pues lo tengo escuchado ya varias veces. Entonces, una de las cosas que hacen es que, por ejemplo, el roadmap es un reflejo de la parte de lo que ellos tienen hechos en Gear, ¿no? Que es, debe ser esta herramienta para poder coordinar equipos de trabajo y demás. Y que, bueno, estaba comentando de que el ISO Council está conectado directamente con este sistema para poder estar en contacto con los desarrolladores y demás. Y si a la hora de tener problemas en lo que son los servidores y demás, si el feedback recabado por los errores que se pudieran producir a las construcciones, ¿no?, que se enviasen y demás, si estaba atado o anclado al mismo sistema que estaba el ISO Council del GIAR ¿no? Y dicen que sí, que es el mismo sistema y que con respecto al ISO Council que tratarán de darle más visibilidad en el futuro. Bueno, que esperan poder cambiar eso. La verdad es que el ISO Council ahora mismo está como un poco... O sea, es un poco tedioso el tener que utilizarlo y reportar un bug, ¿no? Pero bueno, es que al final, claro, si quieres dar detalle de un bug y demás y lo que pasa, hay que picar un poco de letra.
You have to have a human decision. You have to have a review, another human decision, making sure that these are the correct values. And then it goes from there and it becomes automated and autoscaling kicks in and manages the environment from here.
Yeah, I think it's comparable to a lot to the way that we use like procedural generation in our planets and stuff. You can use these automation tools to help you and to assist and to get you started or to maybe even finish a job. But there's always got to be these checkposts where humans are involved to validate the decisions to determine what's going on. It's just you'll never there's no replacement for the human element.
And just to add something real quick, as the project matures, as parts of the project mature, as we know we're not going to be moving a lot of knobs here, we can offset these parts and make them like super self-maintained. Self-healing is a big topic in our industry, and we want to talk about it. If a reactive environment, the environment that reacts to itself, and we might get to talk about that a little bit about how we are trying to enhance the metrics or the traces or the logs or the insights inside our services, so we can let our infrastructure make decisions based on these insights.
Yeah. I mean, one key part that's still a human intervention, I think, both on platform and game, is the flip of the environments, right? So the game, as Ahmed was mentioning, is deployed using the green-blue deployment. That means that while you guys are playing a game online on prod, for example, and we're preparing a new build, there's that's the blue one, and then the green one's being built, or vice versa, right? And so at some point when the build's validated, there's the flip happens, and a human says, okay, we're flipping, and that's where the build goes live. It gets available in a launcher, servers are flipping over and rotating, and so that's still a human doing that, and it actually requires a couple people saying yes before it actually happens.
Oh no, I
Está comentando que el proceso de cambiar las builds en los servidores, que es algo que requiere del uso o sea, que requiere una persona detrás, que no es un proceso automatizado de momento, ¿no? Que dice que tiene que haber una persona detrás que diga sí, ¿no? Que ellos, digamos que cuando tienen la construcción, digamos que nosotros jugaríamos lo que llaman la green, la verde, ¿no? La construcción verde, y que ellos cuando están trabajando en una PTU, pues sería la azul, la blue, ¿no? Y entonces cuando la blue, o sea, el azul pasa a verde, pues por así decirlo, pues es cuando hacen el flip, ¿no? El giro. Cuando hacen el giro y cuando una persona pues va pues modificando las versiones o sea, un grupo de personas, de hecho, dice que en realidad lleva que lo haga un grupo de personas, va modificando la build de los servidores y dándole a todos sí, para lo visto, ¿no?
But somebody always has to make the decision to request a build, even if that's a release build.
Right. From the live chat, is there a secret dev build?
A secret dev build?
A secret dev build?
There's always a secret dev build.
They've all got their feature builds.
Ahmed, what deployment strategy are we using? Are we doing rolling canary? What are we using?
So we do them all. Like we discussed in the beginning about how we do blue-green. Blue-green is usually when we are delivering a lot of breaking changes. A lot of things are like, okay, we cannot have half and half. These things are not going to play nice together. And this is an in development like a product currently in development, so we need to get you guys in the new stuff so we can see what's going on. From the moment that we publish a big build to a large environment like live, we can do what we call them hot fixes. We can do between 5 and 20 hot fixes. And these are either canary released or rolled. Like in 3.10.0, we canaried 6 hot fixes for the hub server, and we rolled the last one. And that happens in every single aspect. There are areas of the game that can allow for some toggling, where we can toggle features on and off, or hot coding or hot changing data. And there are other areas that because the challenge in running a game in the cloud is the statefulness, the experience between a very immersive game like ours, a game client like ours, and the game server is super stateful. This is a very fragile experience. If you did anything here, you lose that connection. And we are actually always discussing how we can make that less fragile, so people like us do not have so many precious parts of our environments that we cannot touch, that the players are off. But we do both. We do canary, we do rolling, and we also initially do a blue-green. Hopefully in the future, as the project matures, we stop dealing with the concept of a deployment. It's an environment that's always going, and there's always pieces moving all the way around. But we still have to do a lot more things before we get there.
It's fair. Miles, what's the...
A ver si consigo hacer esto rápido. Dice que cuando sacan una build, que digamos que hay que corregir, pues que ya corrigen como... Hacen muchas correcciones rápidas de 20 a 100, depende, ¿no? Pero suele haber, cada build que sacan suele haber este tipo de correcciones. Y que dicen que bueno, que tienen la oportunidad de apagar o encender cosas, digamos, de características o cosas que hay en el servidor. Pero claro, que es bastante delicado y tienen que tener mucho cuidado porque en un juego como el que tenemos aquí en Star Citizen, que la inmersión es tan importante, el toquetear cosas, hay un espacio, ¿no?, de toquetear cosas que si toca demasiadas cosas pues puede romper esa inmersión o puede fastidiar esa inmersión, esa experiencia jugable. Entonces tienen que tener cuidado con lo que apagan y lo que no, y que espera que cuando todo madure y el juego esté más avanzado, pues que sea mucho más liviano este proceso, mucho más fácil este proceso de que ya vayan fallando menos cosas, en definitiva. Y además, pues digamos que es una parte delicada en esta situación porque hay cosas que están constantemente en movimiento. Pues se están cambiando cosas, incluyendo cosas. Pues cada 3 meses ya sabéis que prácticamente es un juego nuevo, ¿no?
Depending on what environment you're wanting to deploy to, it could be potentially one, more human interaction, which uses the same interface we kick our builds through to deploy to our internal staging environments. I think Ahmed could address outside of that for me.
Yeah. If it's a larger environment, it goes through like people talking. It goes through people deciding that this is the build we want to go with, and then from then the humans just do the decisions. What we were talking about earlier, everything is driven by version control, everything is driven by get, but there's a human saying yes. And we did not abstract that into a GUI yet. We didn't see the need for that. This is we call ourselves DevOps. I know this is some kind of hairy topic for a lot of people. DevOps is a philosophy, not a title, but that's what the market goes for. But we try to really hold the values of DevOps close to us. We share the ownership of that product. This gaming experience is ours. I can spend more than 50% of my time investigating an issue about how a player is unable to connect something because I have the access to all these tools and I can try to go and investigate it. So to go back, when it comes to a deployment to a larger environment, that's usually where human decisions are being implemented, but all the actual work of provisioning, configuring, securing is automated. Or it would take days. It would take weeks to deploy the whole environment manually, like with how it spreads around the world.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember you remember what the DevOps what that DevOps chart was. The
figure eight.
Two
figure
circles.
Eight. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what are the points on that one. I'm trying to remember what they are.
It's a lot. See, that's the thing. These terms are coined and they create some issues sometimes. My take on this, I can take the whole if I want to say, be close to your problems. Know what kind of problems you're trying to solve. And we are in an amazing time where there are a lot of open source projects that you can go and see what everyone else is doing and get it done. Every organization taken, every project taken, DevOps is kind of unique. And we are one of the very unique ones.
That's a safe bet. In the last year, this says in the last year, but if you want to go beyond the last year, you can go beyond last year. What patch was the most challenging for you on the back end? If you think of a nightmare patch for you guys, what's the one that you don't like to think about anymore?
Last.
You want to go last, Ahmed?
I'm thinking
Yeah.
I think 3.0 for me because the patch before that was so far, right? And to echo what Ahmed was talking about in terms of DevOps philosophy, if you don't deploy for a long time, then you forget how to deploy, right? And so 3.0 was the longest running.
Bueno, estaba comentando el tipo este de abajo que habla mucho el cabrón, pero dice muchas cosas importantes, claro. Estaba comentando de que a la hora de corregir errores y demás en un parche que digamos que están, o sea, en resumidas cuentas, que están en una fase muy bonita del proyecto porque son capaces de ver lo que están haciendo todos los equipos a la vez, como que se ve, ¿no? Como que hay ese nivel de comunicación ahora mismo. Y bueno, lo que le están preguntando ahora después de esto es el hecho de... el hecho de decir cuál es el parche, o sea, el parche que les ha supuesto más reto, ¿no? O el que más difícil les ha sido de desplegar, o sea, de hacer la build. Pero antes de eso estaba diciendo de que, claro, de que a la hora de ellos desplegar lo que son los entornos, que es otra parte del proceso de construir la build, pues tienen como un sistema semiautomático en el sentido de que tiene que haber una persona que diga que sí, que se despliega eso, pero que si tuviera que hacerlo todo a mano, de desplegar todos esos entornos, es decir, pues entornos en plan rollo Deimar, Delamar, Portolizar, o sea, todo lo que, pues sería una locura, ¿vale? Que llevaría demasiado tiempo. Que hay una parte automática y otra parte o sea, una parte, digamos, que hace una máquina y otra parte que hace una persona que es la de aprobar ese paso, ¿no? Con respecto a la build de que le estaba costando más, están comentando un poquito de que lo más jodido que les ha resultado ha sido la 3.0. ¿Por qué ha sido la 3.0? Porque dice que cuando llevas tiempo sin sacar una build que te oxidas, ¿no? Y acordaros de que, bueno, de que de la 2.6 a la 3.0 pasó un montón de tiempo, ¿no? Antes no se sacaban builds como ahora, igual era una al año, una cosa así. Y ahora pues estamos teniendo una build cada 3 meses. La diferencia es brutal, ¿no?
Are actually developing this game with us, and I'm not saying that because like you really see that. And 3.9 was a lot of people doing a lot of things. We were learning a lot. We cannot stop learning from what happened during 3.9 and Fleet Week. And one of the major also ideas in DevOps is measure everything. And as Benoit was talking earlier, testing a game and automating the test of a game is challenging. It's relatively doable to test RBCs or API calls, but the immersion, like how the game runs and everything, that is difficult. And 3.9, we had that. We had that. Okay, everyone is testing everything everywhere. They're doing everything, and we were receiving all this data and digesting it, reacting to it. I do not have an accurate number, but the number of hotfixes that went in 3.9 for a week was really, really high.
Yeah, I was wondering if one of you guys were going to mention the conversion to the Delta patcher, if not that conversion, but
actually this actually went pretty well.
That was 3.0.
It was 3.0, wasn't it?
It was before 3.0 though.
We got to see the big diff. You're right.
Because we got to run the Delta patcher on PTU for like a month and a half. I just remember my biggest memory about.
Claro, está diciendo que una de las builds más gordas que hicieron, uno de los puntos de inflexión después de la 3.0 y todo eso, que fue la 3.9, que parece ser que avanzaron un montón y que además fue un recibimiento masivo de datos de muchas partes. La verdad es que fue un parche bastante gordo la 3.9. Hay que recordar, ¿no? Que, bueno, vino Microtech, vinieron un montón de cosas, ¿no? Y el tema de la climatología, si no recuerdo mal, fue en la 3.9, ¿no? Todo lo que es el clima, el sistema de vuelo, todo eso. O sea, yo recuerdo que vino un montón de cosas en la 3.9 en realidad. Y está comentando eso, de que la cantidad aparte de la cantidad de hotfixes que tuvieron que aplicar en la 3.9, que fue una salvajada también.
See, we look at the CDN graphs and we see these beta bytes coming out. Like, can you imagine if the delta batch was not here, how much data you're pushing? It's one of these things that we take for granted now, but it was an amazing big change for us.
Critical technology for sure.
It's a seemingly
luego le estaban preguntando sobre el Delta Patch y tal, pero bueno, el Delta Patch, que para quien no lo sepa, antes el Star Citizen nos teníamos que bajar una build completa de cada vez, para la 2.6. Luego salió el Delta Patch, que estuvo en PTU durante un tiempo, y salió con la 3.0, y a partir de la 3.0, pues el juego se actualizaba. O sea, antes el juego no se actualizaba, había que instalarlo de cero de cada vez, ¿no?
So, not really. In fact, the long-term persistence was engineered to basically persist your data that you earn in game between patches, right? So it saves your money and the history of all of the UEC money that you've got. So every transaction up and down, current values of all your ledgers. The inventory system that's part of LTP is also there to store, A, you own a Hornet, right? Or A, you own a Constellation, right? The state of these objects. So, this Hornet's missing its left wing was abandoned at Grim Hex, or so that's stored in the persistence system. So iCache will basically bring more state tracking, more state persistence, but we're still going to persist the same amount or the same kind of records between patches to be able to rebuild the state when we do a data wipe on the iCache side. So the reason why that's still an issue is because the schemas of those objects is still moving, right? And so we still need to do that. But the only change that will come from it is that there are some parts of the iCache API that allow better handling of stacking objects. So let's say you buy 50 magazines, right? The way that's handled in the iCache is much better. And so the LTP systems will track that better. And so that's not the only change. But the functionality for players should function the same way.
And for anybody that hasn't...
Mira, aquí está comentando una cosa acerca del estado de las cosas y demás, de que bueno, que ahora hay una especie de persistencia en la que se guardan ese tipo de estado de la nave, de si está rota, si le falta un ala, o que el iCache en realidad pues es una mejora en eficiencia, y por ejemplo una de las mejoras que tiene y de que además pues va a permitir más cosas, ¿no? Que más cosas tengan este tipo de persistencia el iCache, no solo pues el hecho de nuestra nave o de cosas del jugador, que recordamos que ahora mismo el estado de esa persistencia solo está limitado a lo que serían los jugadores, que lo decía el otro día Top Papi. Entonces, para el jugador en sí, pues dice que va a hacer que ese LTP, que es la Long Term Persistence, ese sistema funcione más ágil, sea más ágil, y por ejemplo, la manera en la que estaquea, pues, la manera en la que acumula objetos sea más eficiente. Es decir, si nos compramos 50 cargadores, pues el iCache lo va a hacer de una manera más eficiente, va a ser más ágil en definitiva que el sistema que hay ahora.
The things I'm excited for, we have 2 new engineers that will join the team on Monday. So that is a big thing. Hopefully more hands on the keyboard, more minds, more people designing all these challenging solutions with us. So yeah, a lot of good stuff happening.
This has definitely been a year of growth. Actually, last year was a year. We've been growing for a while, so I'm thinking about it. Over 600 and some odd people now.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right, we've been throwing you softballs. Let me look for some hard balls here. When a server crashes, here we go. When a server crashes, why?
Cuando un servidor crashea,
That's for you, Amen.
Because C++? I don't know.
When a server crashes, how long is it until that server is ready to go again? And is this process automated?
Yes. So the server doesn't have to come again. If we are actually in a time where we're shrinking down, we are actually have the servers can go away and never get used again. There's another pool of servers. If we are in a time where actually we need resources, the server will crash and it will come back in a different new incarnation. We'll have new logical name to it, have new ID to it, and it'll become part of the pools of instances that can host games. But yeah, nothing has like a long-lasting name or a long-lasting existence. Everything is the common word that we use in our field is ephemeral. So these instances are just instances. They come and go all the time. No one touches them. They decide to crash on their own. They get sad.
Was it ants not cattle, cattle not pets, right?
Yeah,
Circles.
absolutely.
Ephemeral. Good word use, Ahmed.
Not mine.
What benchmarks do you use to determine how a particular build progresses from Evocati to PTU to live? Now, before you answer that, though, I want to clarify that it's nobody in this call that determines whether something goes from one stage to another.
Vale, lo primero que está diciendo es que aquí no hay nadie que determine quién va, o sea, si la build sale de Bocati a PTU o no, pero ¿qué tipo de test utilizan para determinar si una build sale de Bocati a PTU?
Democratic call, the way it works. Whenever we are in the mode of releasing, we have the live sync meeting that like one of my favorite meetings. We get to have it early in our day, kind of like towards the end of the day in Europe, and we bring up a lot of data. Whenever we go to BTU, there are several types of reports. One of them is a stability report. The stability report tries to model how much disruption we are causing to the player experience. And then we have a player feedback report that comes from the player experience team, and it takes into account all the issue council issues, the feel of the game, if there are any specific features in the gameplay. QA also goes and takes that report and goes through it and try to reproduce by the
Dice que para sacar un parche de Bocati PTU como que es más una acción colectiva, algo más democrático. Se juntan varios grupos, tanto el equipo de experiencia de jugador como el Q&A. Traen también como hay una parte de gente que se dedica también a analizar la estabilidad del parche y de alguna manera pues ver si el parche pues tiene la suficiente estabilidad o la suficiente calidad de alguna manera para salir a PTU de Bocati.
Yeah, it'll be all right. And yeah, it's a lot of moving factors. When it comes to benchmark, it's quantified, collected crash information, stability information, performance information, resource usage information, all collected together, all abstracted in a number, in a model that we call the stability score. And the same side also, we have hard-working teams that try to collect and summarize the game experience, and both of them get together, and then we have the different goals, have different groups, and a very democratic way of deciding how things.
Dice que al final tienen una cosa que le llaman el Stability Score, que es la puntuación de estabilidad, y que esa puntuación de estabilidad es el resumen de varias cosas, pues teniendo la cantidad de crashes que hay, la experiencia que hay con las diferentes mecánicas o la jugabilidad que hay, y que al final que es un conjunto de opiniones de varios grupos, de varias personas, para decidir si sale o no sale esa build a PTU, ¿no? Si se abre un público más amplio.
And it's like, from this candidate to this candidate to this candidate, the exact criteria that determines whether this moves forward and the next step may be different for each one. So there's no easy rubber stamp answer for it, but we use as many tools and equipment and people as possible to make the best possible call.
Even development teams, like some of the game service guys, are going to be watching live PTU builds when they're, to see performance metrics and get a sense of it, right? And so that's also in the mix. And so you're right, it is a hodgepodge of different.
You're full of shit. You're always there, just like kick it. Just kick it out. Just push it.
Yeah. Go.
Benoit's in these things. He's like, I'm on the East Coast. It's already late. Just push it.
LA time builds.
Yep. That's it, guys. You've done it. Congratulations.
Right.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy days at the end of your week to be here on the show with us. It's not always it's a relatively dry subject for folks, and people often ask me why why are you doing this? I'm like, because this shit's important, and that's twice I've sworn in the last 5 minutes.
That's right.
I'm gonna get an email. Sorry, guys. We are going to do a raid. Who are we raiding today? We are raiding Semilia. Semilia is a streamer in Sweden. Sweden, if I remember correctly.
Vale,
So
pues,
check
pues
them out.
nada, yo creo que
If you
para
jump
mí ha
into
sido
the raid,
ha
there,
estado de los
that
que he
when
estado haciendo
it
directo
kicks off here,
el más complicadete,
tell
porque hay un
Siberia,
montón de cosas.
to
Pero
push
nada,
it
seguir
live.
practicando para la Citizen
Benoit
con
said push it
futuras
live.
y lo
Ship
que
it.
venga, ¿no?
Benoit said
Entonces,
ship
pues
it.
nada, daros las gracias por las
Switzerland.
visitillas y por el apoyo que me dais como
When
siempre,
I
que
said
sois la
Sweden, I
rehostia.
meant Switzerland.
Y
Switzerland.
me voy al live.
So check
Nos
that,
vemos ahora.
tell them
Okay,
to
we're in
ship it.
America. It's called the outer world to us. I'm just joking.
Please send all letters to care of Ahmed, Cloud Pyramid Games, Austin, Texas. For Ahmed, for Miles, for Benoit, I'm Jared. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next week.